Hello again, my name is Matt and welcome back to my channel. So today is the first day of Winterween, which is a new readathon hosted by Gabby Reads and oliviareadsalatte. I did their readathon Summerween last year and it was really fun. It's basically a readathon that's dedicated to reading horror books and like dark thrillers, things like that. And this is the beginning of January, so it's the perfect time, perfect atmosphere to kind of knock some of those books out. So I have a very extensive list of like 15 books that I want to get to this week. Obviously, that's not happening. So I'm not really sure what my TBR is yet. There are 5 prompts for this readathon. 1 is to read something with a winter setting. 2 is to read a book that has blue on the cover or is primarily blue. 3 is to read a book with haunt in the title. 4 is to read a short story or novella, and 5 is to read a book entirely in the dark. So the one with the winter theme is actually the one that I've already started, and that's The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I'm already about 100 pages into this, and I'm really enjoying this. So this is going to be for that prompt. Quick update, I did go ahead and finish the short story prompt for this readathon, and I did pick a story out of If It Bleeds by Stephen King. I read the last short story in this collection, which is called Rat. I chose that one because a booktuber that I really enjoy read this book earlier this year, and she said that that was her favorite out of the 4 stories in this collection. I took her word for it and chose that one out of this book to read. It was okay. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I don't ever really know how to rate short stories because I don't feel like I'm not much of a short story person because I feel like I like my stories a lot more fleshed out. Like, it was okay for me. It had an interesting premise. It's about an author who goes to this small town to focus on his novel. He starts getting sick, and that's really all I want to say about it because there is a very weird, interesting twist to the story. And so that's what I'm going to leave you with. It was good for a short story. I'm not that experienced with short stories. I don't read them that often just because they're not really my thing. So it is the end of day 2 of Winterween, and I've already finished 2 more books for this readathon. The first one that I finished was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and this one fits the prompt of a book with a winter theme. This one I really enjoyed. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I did read Jennifer McMahon's book, The Drowning Kind, earlier this year. That book comes out in April of this year, so please put that one on your TBR. That was an amazing 5-star, like, top of the top book for me. This one followed a very similar pattern, although I will say I did enjoy The Drowning Kind a little more, which is why I'm giving this one 4 stars, since that one was definitely a strong 5-star book for me. This one is very similar in that we're following dual timelines and dual characters in those timelines, and they do end up interconnecting. Our first timeline is in 1908, and we're following Sarah, whose daughter dies and Sarah dies shortly after. And we know this at the beginning of the book, so her timeline throughout the book is just kind of unfolding the events of what actually happened that led to her death. And in present day timeline, we're following Ruthie, who is a teenager who actually lives in the house that Sarah lived in before. And her mother goes missing at the beginning of the book. And so she's trying to figure out like why her mother just randomly walked away, why she went missing, what's going on with her mother. She never knew much about her parents and their lives. So she's trying to unfold the mystery of what actually happened to her mother. It is similar to The Drowning Kind in that I think it reads more of a contemporary fiction type of story. It's very character-focused, character-driven story. It just has those supernatural horror elements thrown in there to the story, and that's right up my alley. It was super, super good. Another great book from Jennifer McMahon. The second book that I've already finished for this readathon is The Haunting of Bryn Wilder by Wendy Reb. This one is the buddy read for Winterween, and it also fits the prompt of a book that has haunt in the title. I thought the last like 20-30 pages, I thought it didn't quite stick the landing the way that I wanted it to, but up until that point, I devoured this book. It was a great binge read. I read it so quick and I loved it. The story was just so compulsively readable, and it includes one of my favorite tropes of all time, which is like a summer camp, summer vacation, where you're in like a secluded area, somebody's staying in a cabin or whatever. So we're following Bryn, who is an English professor, and after she's experienced some trauma in her life, she wants to take the summer to kind of recharge. And so she has a friend, Kate. She persuades Bryn to go to her town to spend the summer. She's staying in this old house that's been kind of transformed into a bed and breakfast, owned by this lady named Luann. And in it, we meet the other guests that are staying there for the summer. And the other residents include an older gay couple. And one of the men in the couples ex-wife who is staying with them because she has Alzheimer's. And so she befriends Bryn, and Bryn starts noticing that there's something very weird about her, in that she almost is a clairvoyant, in that she can see things. She's almost has psychic abilities. And Bryn also meets another resident, Dominic, who they call the Illustrated Man, based on the Ray Bradbury story of the same name. He has like tattoos all over his body that are just very extravagant and tell stories. A little bit of creepiness that surrounds him. Bryn is trying to figure out like what's going on with Dominic, what's going on with the lady Alice, and she starts feeling like she's actually haunted in her dreams. There's also a lady who was found dead in that house that she's staying in earlier in the year, and so they've locked her room up, and she starts kind of seeing things and having visions and dreams about it. Like I said, I really enjoyed it a lot. I just thought the ending fell a little flat. It wasn't really where I wanted the book to go, but I still did really enjoy it. It is day 3 of the readathon, and I already finished my 3rd book for the readathon. I finished No Exit by Taylor Adams. I read this whole thing last night in like one sitting almost. It was just so thrilling and so gripping. Like, I could not put it down. I was on the edge of my seat, bitch, for this whole entire book. This book has been so hyped up by booktube over the past year or so, and it definitely did not disappoint. It was a 5-star book. This one fit the prompt of a book that has blue on the cover. We're following this girl, Darby, who is going home for Christmas to visit her dying mother, and she gets stuck in a snowstorm at a rest stop with 4 other strangers. As she goes outside to kind of take a look at the weather and everything like that, she notices that there's a little girl trapped in the back of a van in a cage. And so she goes to investigate, and she knows that obviously one of the 4 people that she's stuck in there with is responsible for it. And so she's trying to figure out who it is and what's going on. And she, of course, wants to save this girl. The entire novel takes place basically at the rest stop over the course of this one night. And it is very thrilling. I want to see this made into a movie so bad. Yeah, I really love this one. Very obviously 5 stars for me. And I also finished a short story yesterday. I read Hannah Beast by Jennifer McMahon. It's one of those like Kindle short stories that are like free for Amazon Prime members and stuff. They have a bunch of those from like Ruth Ware and Lisa Unger, but I found one by Jennifer McMahon, and I read that one yesterday, and I really enjoyed that one. I don't ever really know how to rate short stories as far as the star ranking goes, because I feel like they don't really go far enough to stand out for me that much, but I did really enjoy that one. It takes place at Halloween, and it follows this girl, Erin, and her mother, Amanda. Erin is dressing up as Hannah Beast for Halloween, and Hannah Beast is basically this local legend of this girl who basically terrorized the town one Halloween night a few years ago. In classic Jennifer McMahon style, we're following the 2 timelines. Amanda and Erin are in current day, but we're also flashing back 30 years prior to Hannah's story, and we find out what exactly happened with Hannah and who Hannah Beast actually was. And I really enjoyed that story. It took me about 30 minutes to read it, so if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can read it on Kindle for free. I would recommend it. It was a pretty fun short story to read for this readathon. I already started my 4th book for the readathon, and this is just one that has been on my TBR for a while that I've been wanting to get to, and that's Exquisite Quartz by Poppy Z. Bright. This is a pretty old book. It's from the 90s, but so far I'm about 50 pages in, and I'm loving the way that this is written. It's so dark, so gory, graphic, gruesome, grotesque. So we're following our main character, Andrew, who is a gay serial killer. After he murders his victims, he is a necrophiliac, so he has sex with them. Yeah, and it's very descriptive of that. So if that's not something that you're into, like, just know that going into this book, this probably isn't for you. It's very descriptive of very dark acts and things like that. At the beginning of this book, Andrew is in jail. He's been caught, and he's spent 5 years in jail, and he breaks out of jail, and he meets up with this other guy, Jay, and they target a new victim. And so I believe this story is going to follow the 2 of them as they kind of dually go after this victim. And I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I'm really enjoying it so far. It's really dark and twisted. We get inside of Andrew's head, and it's it's really fucked up and great, and yeah, so I'm enjoying it. It's day 4 of Winterween, and we've got to talk about this book that I just finished last night, Exquisite Quartz by Poppy Z. Bright. He is a famous horror author from the 90s. This book came out in, I believe, 94 or 96. This was a 5-star book. This is my favorite book that I've read so far in this readathon. It's probably the most gory, grotesque, graphic horror book that I've ever read. And I loved every minute of it, to be completely honest. This is basically like a gay American Psycho. We're following this serial killer named Andrew as he's just escaped from prison. And we're also following another gay serial killer named Jay. And about halfway through the book, they meet up and interconnect with each other. And they basically just start like teaming up to kill their victims. This book is, like I said, extremely graphic. There is a lot of very descriptive gore and sex scenes, rape scenes. They're both basically necrophiliacs, so they like have sex with their victims after they've murdered them. And there are descriptions of that in here, so if any of that like turns you off, definitely stay away from this book because it's extremely descriptive, and I was definitely shuddering and cringing for a lot of this book, but I love how uncomfortable that it made me. I think that it was so well written to really like make your skin crawl, you know, and I personally loved it a lot. Maybe that makes me fucked up, but yeah. It is the last day of Winterween, and I've finished my last 2 books for the readathon. I haven't updated in a few days, but we're here now. So the next book that I finished was Tinder is the Flesh, which is set in a near future Argentina where it's become kind of a dystopia and cannibalism is like the main source of food at this point in time. And we're following our main character Marcos, who works at a factory processing like the human meat. And so we follow him, and it's basically all about his story, and there's a lot of very graphic descriptions of like the cannibalism and processing of the humans. I thought that this was such an interesting book to read directly after Exquisite Corpse because it deals with very similar issues. Funny enough, Tinder is the Flesh actually directly references Exquisite Corpse in one point, and I was just kind of mind blown because I literally read it like as the next book. I thought that this book has a lot of very interesting commentary. It has a lot of things to say. It reminded me a lot of like Animal Farm. It was very Orwellian for me. I've also seen it compared a lot to Ayn Rand's work and Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And so I'm very interested in going back and reading some of those works and seeing how it actually compares to those because I remember reading Animal Farm back in high school, so it's been like a decade ago, and all that I remember about that book is that I didn't like it, but I liked the activities and the discussions that we did around it. For me, Tinder is the Flesh. I think I'm going to end up giving it like a 3.5 star, maybe even a 4. I'm just gonna have to sit with it for a minute. Even though it's only like a 200-page book, I have to say that for Tinder is the Flesh, it wasn't the most like entertaining book for me. It wasn't the most plot-driven book that wanted to make me like keep on reading it, but it had some very, very interesting things to say. It has a very interesting commentary on politics and the way that the world is starting to go based on the ideas that the book presents was really good. I feel like I would have gotten more out of this book if I would have read it with other people instead of just like reading it on my own. I think that it's a book that definitely would be great for like a book club or something like that because it definitely makes me want to discuss it with other people and see what other people thought of different scenes and what you think that different things symbolize and represent, because for me there were some parts that were a little lost on me and I would like to dive into a little bit more of the meanings behind those. Overall, I did really enjoy it. I think it's going to end up at like a 3.5. And the final book that I finished for Winterween was Little Darlings by Melanie Golding. This is more of just a thriller, but I thought that based on the synopsis of the book that it was going to lean a bit more into darker territory, almost horror. So I thought it would be good for this readathon. I've been wanting to read this one for a while. This is actually a book that's based on folklore, like Grimm's fairy tales type of stuff. But I unfortunately did not enjoy this one as much as I thought I was going to. It's like a 2.5-star book for me. I just thought a lot of it was just really boring. I had some good suspenseful parts in it, but I felt like for over half of this book, I was just really bored. So basically this book, we're following this lady. I don't even remember what the names of the characters are in this book. That's how I felt about it. We're following this lady who just gave birth to a set of twins, and she claims that while she's still in the hospital after giving birth, that this like old gross lady sitting in her room with her own set of twins, she says that she wants to switch their babies because she's a poor like homeless lady, and then our main character has, you know, a good life going on, and so she wants to switch their children to give them different experiences. And so obviously the mother like freaks out, and so the first half of the book is just this mother like being paranoid about like she thinks that she sees this lady everywhere, and she's just like having a panic attack in every chapter, and it's just like I got really bored of that happening. And finally, like what is told in the synopsis happens like over halfway through the book, which is where she sees this old lady again, and she believes that she actually switches the twins. And so the mother gets put into this mental hospital because everybody just thinks she's crazy because she keeps claiming that she's seeing this old lady wanting to take her babies, and she's claiming that the babies that she currently has aren't even hers, like their eye color is different and everything like that, and she's just adamant that these are not her children. And so we've also got this police woman who's investigating with it. I don't know, this was just a really weird one. It was different. It was definitely different for a thriller, I will give it that. It's something that I've never, like, seen before since it so explicitly references, like, the dark fairy tales and stuff like that. So it's definitely not a realistic type of thriller. Like it definitely has some magical elements to it. Like a lot of it just was really boring to me. It was just a lot of this lady like running around having a panic attack all the time because she thinks that she's seeing this lady. And yeah, I don't really have strong opinions about this book. It was just okay for me. So this is easily my least favorite book that I read for this readathon, though. So to wrap up this Winterween vlog, just a quick review of what I've read within this week. And again, a huge thanks to Gabby over at Gabby Reads and Olivia Reads Alatte for hosting this readathon. It was super fun. Again, I was able to knock out quite a bit of books that I've been wanting to read for a while. So I read 5 books and 2 short stories for this readathon. The 2 short stories, I read Rat by Stephen King, which was in the book If It Bleeds. And that one was like, okay. I think it was like a 3-star. If I rated short stories, I would probably give that one like somewhere in the middle, like a 3-star something. Second one that I read was Hannah Beast by Jennifer McMahon, which I really enjoyed that one. Like I said, I don't rate short stories. That it was just too short for me to really like have a strong opinion about it, but I did really enjoy that one and I would recommend it. The first book that I read was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, which I liked a lot. I give this 4 stars. The only reason it wasn't quite a 5-star for me was because I enjoyed her newest book, The Drowning Kind, a bit better than this one. So I felt like this one wasn't really on that same 5-star level for me from Jennifer McMahon as an author, but I still did really like this one, and I want to read more from her for sure. The next book that I read for this readathon was The Haunting of Bryn Wilder by Wendy Webb, which was the buddy read for Winterween. And both Gabby and Olivia disliked this book a lot, and upon reflection and figuring out some of the plot holes that I completely missed about this book, I originally was debating between like a 3.5 and a 4 for this book because I really enjoyed the first like 75% of this book. I thought it was just a really easy read and it was really entertaining. Even though it wasn't so much into the horror vibes that I thought I was going to get from this book, I still really enjoyed it. But let me tell you, this ending just really sucked. I hated it so much. I thought it was so cheesy, it was so corny, and it just really brought this book way down for me. So I think I'm going to end up sitting at like a 2.5 for this book instead. Even though I did really enjoy most of the book, the ending just really sucked and I hated it. And because of that, I have to bring the rating for this book way down. So I think I'm going to sit at a 2.5 for this one. Hello, this is Matt from the future, and I just realized as I'm editing this video that I completely left out No Exit. I think that I forgot that I read it for this readathon because I read so many books, but Yeah, I read this one, and this was another five-star book for me. I loved this one. It was really fast-paced, really thrilling. Yep, so this one was another favorite that I read this week. And book number 3 that I read, and definitely my favorite book out of this readathon, was Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. This is like a horror classic. This was written back in the 90s. We're following not one, but two gay serial killers who kind of team up. I love this book so much. It was easily 5 stars. It was so gritty, so graphic, so gruesome, grotesque, everything that I love in a book. It was very gay, very sexual, very fun to read, very dark, and I loved it. And it's not going to be a book that a lot of people like, but this was for me. I don't know what that says about me as a person, that I loved something that was this gruesome, but I did, so get over it. Book number 4 was Tinder is the Flesh, which is set in a near future Argentina where cannibalism is kind of the norm and human meat is being processed for everyone to eat as part of their everyday meals. It has a lot of really interesting commentary. I thought that the book itself wasn't that entertaining to me, but it just had a lot of interesting things to say. And I think with that one, I'm going to sit at a 3.5. I do really want to discuss that book with a few other people and maybe give it a reread sometime soon. But for now, I'm sitting at a 3.5 with it. And then the last book that I read was Little Darlings by Melanie Golding. This one was by far my least favorite one that I read this week. I just thought it was super boring and I didn't really care about it a lot. Basically a dark thriller that's influenced by Grimm's fairy tales and like European folklore. It's about this lady who gives birth to twins, and she immediately is met by this like old witch who has twins of her own, and she wants to basically switch her children. And so the mother believes that she's given her like these demon children. It's definitely a weird thriller. It's nothing like I've ever read before in a thriller, I don't think. And I thought it sounded a lot more interesting than it actually ended up being. It was just way too long, really boring, really repetitive. Didn't really like it that much. 2 stars. And that's Winterween. I'm already ready for Summerween, to be honest. This was so much fun. I really enjoy these readathons, so I would definitely recommend Exquisite Corpse if you're into really gruesome and graphic body horror. I really liked this one. Also, The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon would have been my other choice, was my other favorite from this week. Also, just because I can't plug it enough, read her new book, The Drowning Kind, when it comes out later this year. It's one of my favorites. I adored that book so much. That one was easily 5 stars. This one wasn't quite as good as The Drowning Kind for me, but this one I still really enjoyed. Yep, and that's Winterween. See ya!